y'all annotated and then were like graded on annotated, like on your annotations for like a book or something. And so this is going to be a tad different. Part of our skill 1 through 3 test is going to be your annotations. So I want to show you multiple times what my expectations of annotations are, so that when you get it scored for your test, you'll know exactly like what you need to do to be successful. Okay, so have out your skill 1 for Bush for sure, and then let's walk our way through like annotations and what I expect and what I look for. So when we annotate, our annotation purpose is we annotate to plan. So skill 1 is deconstruction of the prompt, right? Rhetorical situation. Skill 2 is going to be annotations, and we're annotating to plan, which is skill 3. And then skill 4 is writing. So ultimately, we are only going to write down things that will help us write a better paper, not a summary. So when you annotate with summary, you end up writing summary, which is what I saw in most of your like essays that we did for a diagnostic, right? Most of it was like summary. So we're going to do a couple of things. We're going to annotate to plan in here for sure. When we are looking through things, we are looking, trying to figure out where to write this. So with the notes that y'all have been taking, we have chapter 1 and chapter 2, we've talked about, like it's talked about rhetoric, and really all rhetoric is it's like how authors use language to manipulate the audience. That's my definition. That's my like textbook definition, is that really all rhetoric is the idea of like how authors write things in order to manipulate an audience into understanding something and then to doing something. It's not necessarily agreeing all the time, right? So when we look for rhetoric, we are looking for patterns of language. And you'll hear me say a lot like, what language is in there? What language do you see? So when I talk about patterns of language, it can be a pattern of words, a pattern of ideas, a pattern of structure, we'll never just pick out individual words, so there always has to be some kind of pattern. I say that patterns are almost melodic, meaning that you can hear that there's something, and in the beginning you may not know exactly what to label it, but that's where we'll kind of work through things together, is to figure out like what do we call it. So when we talk about labels, this idea of rhetorical choices is any decision the author or speaker makes to say things or do things a certain way. For rhetorical choices, you will hear me call them labels. So I don't need a technical term of rhetorical choices. You're just going to say, like, you're going to hear me say, like, what do we want to label that? What do we want to call that? We're going to attach something onto it. In the beginning, you're going to want to do a lot of like literature stuff that you've learned, and not all literature things that you label like conflict, character development, setting, play over. Some things will, some things won't, but we'll kind of talk through those together to see like what the difference is. Another thing that we look for when we look at patterns of language, obviously a big one is going to be repetition. And there are all different forms of repetition that you will see, and we'll kind of label like the differences in those types of repetitions once we get there. You're also going to look for like lists. That will become one of your best friends, is any time that you can see a list, there's going to be a lot of analysis for it. We also look for conjunctions. What are conjunctions? Like, what are they? Do you remember like an acronym that represents them?
Fanboys.
Fanboys, there you go. for, and, nor, but, or, yet, so, right? Fanboys. So we look for those. We also look for certain punctuation, a semicolon, because we look at what comes before it and what comes after it. Same thing for a colon. We look at what comes before it and what comes after it. A dash, we're going to try to stay away from a dash in the beginning because it is a little bit more difficult to, it's easy to label and identify. It's difficult to analyze. But again, with the dash, we look at what comes before it and what comes after it. Okay? So we look for all those things as we are annotating, and that's what we're going to look to label. When we do annotations, we do no summary. There's no value in summary. I lie. When we read more difficult things like thorough, we'll read in the spring, it's more difficult. We almost have to read it once to understand it. A lot of pre-20th century, pre-19th century stuff is more difficult. So sometimes you have to read to understand and then annotate to plan, right? So you have to figure out kind of the passage itself. So we'll never annotate for summary because it's a waste of our time, especially when we understand like it's a pretty easy passage, which is what we have. One thing we will never annotate or label is diction. What is diction? You might know. Word choice. So I believe in one thing in here. Well, I mean, maybe I believe in multiple things, but I believe in like the Puritans were like had something going when they shamed people for doing things wrong. So like if we talk about diction in here, you'll probably hear many sarcastic remarks from me towards that. So like basically I'll shame you into never saying diction. Same thing for ethos, logos, pathos. We'll never talk about those words in here. I talk about diction like connotation and denotation. All that is like individual words. We'll never just pull out like individual words from a passage because there's no value individually. Diction is author's word choice as opposed to what? Like what else is the author going to choose? Pantomime, interpretive dance, cave drawings. That's sarcasm. You can laugh a little. God, you aren't giving me anything today. Okay, so when we talk about diction, like I'll show you like what else we need to look at specifically. Okay, the other thing we need to look at that's good that when we went online, now our online test have, and I'll show you this or has, is that it numbers paragraphs. So our paragraphs are numbered, which I like because before it was just lines and that didn't do us any good because we still would go through and look at numbered paragraphs because when we are looking at it, the very first thing we're going to do when we look at our numbered paragraphs is we're going to look for a shift. So there is a shift. There could be a shift in tone, which you find more when you read. You could shift, like find a shift in like point of view. You can find a shift in like length of paragraphs. They're reviewing for Gatsby. We will never have that much fun. Just a heads up. Tone, point of view, lengths of paragraphs, those are all things that we're going to look for, right? In a shift. When we look for a shift, we're going to only read, when we're looking at our numbers, we're only going to read like the first couple of words. So, good evening, blah. Today, our fellow, a great people, 3, 4, immediately following, 5, the search, 6, I appreciate, 7, tonight, 8, this is, 9, thank you. So I kind of like throw out the good evening and thank you paragraphs because there's nothing going to be in there. and I look for shifts. Like, what is there anything in the words in the first couple of words of a paragraph that suggests some shift that I can guess? You may be wrong. That's fine. But when I'm looking at today, the other shift could be time. That's a big one. So today suggests time, right? Immediately is still that same morning, like that day, right? Like today. Search, appreciate, tonight. Okay, so now I see a shift in time, right? Today, immediately. I'm going to group those together, and then tonight. So I'm going to guess a shift between immediately and the search. And I physically draw a line in there, and I label that a shift. I'll figure out if I'm right once I start reading and annotating. But this, for me, is like a physical reminder. When I get there, have I seen a shift or have I heard a shift? So if I have, then I kind of start to mark it there. This shift will play into like how we organize our body paragraphs. We usually only find one. I'm only looking for one, but I see tonight, so I could see like another guess of a shift there. So we write 2 body paragraphs, and we'll talk about this more in skill 3. So if I have 2 shifts, that would suggest 3 paragraphs, right? One before the shift and after the shift, right? So if we have 2 shifts, I'll show you what we do. We always have one primary, and then if we have secondary, I'll show you how we deal with those. But I'm just going to guess it for now, and I'll deal with it once I get to that paragraph, whether or not it is a shift and what we do with it. All right. So when we annotate, I'm going to start reading, but we annotate chronologically. Chronologically through the whole passage and chronologically through the paragraph. So whole passage and paragraph. Why? Because we'll always look at things from the top down instead of like searching and finding, which I feel like we kind of do a lot when we are in like literature, like hunt and find. So I'm going to read a paragraph to you, and then we'll stop and I'll kind of walk you through like what I see and questions and stuff like that. Good evening. Today, our fellow citizens, our way of life, our very freedom, came under attack in a series of deliberate and deadly terrorist attacks. The victims were in airplanes or in their offices. Secretaries, businessmen and women, military and federal workers, moms and dads, friends and neighbors. Thousands of lives were suddenly ended by evil, despicable acts of terror. The pictures of airplanes flying into buildings, fires burning, huge structures collapsing have filled us with disbelief, a terrible sadness, and a quiet, unyielding anger. These acts of mass murder were intended to frighten our nation into chaos and retreat, but they have failed. Our country is strong. All right, so I look at good evening, like there's nothing to say about it, right? So if I look in that first sentence, turn to your partner, what pattern do you see in there that we could look at? You got like 30 seconds, go. All right, if I'm looking at just patterns, what pattern do you see in the first sentence that we want to look at?
When you say patterns, what do you mean? Like the list?
Anything that, just in the first sentence. So anything, it could be a pattern of words, it could be a pattern of ideas, it could be a pattern of structure.
If he lists the victims. Like
Nope, that's the second sentence. Just the first sentence.
A repetition of the phrase like our.
Okay, so repetition works for me, right? So we have our. So I'm going to jot down repetition here. Now, one of the most important things about repetition that we remember when there's a word repeated, we want to look at what's attached. So it's never just the word that is important that's repeated. It is what is attached to it, right? So our fellow citizens, our way of life, our very freedom. Oh, is that what you were talking about, the list of that? Oh, you said list of victims. So I would consider still that a list, but I would look more at like the repetition. But we always want to look at like what's attached to it, because just analyzing our doesn't give us a lot to say, but what's attached to it gives us a little bit more of a pattern, right? Okay. I would also say there's one more thing in there that I would probably note that I said to look for in the first sentence. Mm-mm.
Describing the terrorist acts.
That's not what we're looking for. You're telling me the what?
Oh, there's the things. I don't know what they call it. Dead. Something like that.
The conjunction. Where's the conjunction in the first sentence?
And
Y'all, this is going to be a long week if it takes that much.
Or deadly.
So we look at and, right? Deliberate and deadly. What is the purpose of and? What does it do? Connects ideas. It connects things, right? So it's connecting deliberate and deadly. So we have a conjunction there as well. So most of the time y'all would probably say, oh, that's diction, deliberate, deadly, diction. It doesn't mean anything. But when we talk about conjunctions, now we can kind of indirectly talk about diction, right? So we have repetition and conjunctions. Now, when we annotate, we're going to do two things. We're going to look at a label, and then we're going to connect it to the rhetorical situation. So, when we look at the rhetorical situation, I don't need guessing. We spent a whole class period doing rhetorical situation, right? So, when we look at rhetorical situation and connect it to it, we want to be about a specific component. We can't just say speaker. We can't just say context. I need something specifically in there that we talked about. So turn to your partner. That first sentence, what is a component of the rhetorical situation, and what specifically in that component can we connect it to? Talk to your partner. You got like 30 seconds. Go. All right. What's a component of the rhetorical situation that we can connect it to? Okay, what specific one?
Our fellow citizens.
That's not one of our audiences. And if you look at audience, you want to look at like who didn't know the information or who can now see the information differently through that piece of evidence. So scared Americans won't work, victims won't work, angry American, we all know that that happened, right? So that doesn't do anything for us. I don't mind audience, but what specific audience? You don't have to look at me. You have a piece of paper in front of you. Okay, so I agree with that. Political leaders. Is that one what you have on there? We have foreign leaders. Terrorists as well. I like that. Those would work for me. All right. Anything else? Any other component of the rhetorical situation that we can connect it to?
Could you connect it to exigence?
Okay, I agree. Why?
It's giving like the rundown of the day, like of what happened today, like why he's here.
Okay, so it gives a little bit of like why he's here. I think specifically the part that does is the deliberate and deadly. Right? Why he's making a national address is because, like at that time, is because it wasn't an accident. If it was an accident, he could have made the speech earlier, right? But the idea of deliberate and deadly shows all audiences that this was a choice that was made, right? I agree with exigence. That would work for me. All right. The victims were in airplanes or in their offices, secretaries, businessmen and women, military, federal workers, moms, dads, friends, and neighbors. What's in there that you want to label?
Another list.
There is a list. Yep. Where?
The victims.
Okay. So after the colon, we have a list because a colon suggests a list. We also have conjunctions, right? You also have like a short, like in airplanes, in their offices, prepositional phrases that are showing like location. So you have a list and you have conjunctions. All right. Rhetorical situation. What can we connect it to? Fine, you have 20 seconds to talk to each other. Ready, set, go. All right, rhetorical situation.
I want to say leverage because all the conjunctions add weight to.
Nope. I don't need analysis because y'all are going to be wrong most of the time. All I need is why would we attach it to that rhetorical situation? Context is what? Look at what we labeled as context. Context is what's happening around that time, not what is happening right then. Okay, what audience? That's not one of our audiences. Y'all stop guessing. There are words on your page right in front of you. I don't mind audience, but what audience?
People that lead, people that die.
Is that on our list?
No, it's not.
Military and federal workers.
That is the list. You're telling me things that are like here, military and federal workers. I can't label military and federal workers because that's right there. Okay, that's on our list. That's the first thing that I've heard that is actually in our audience. Yes. However, does that audience, when they get that information, is that something new to them? So then, is that a valuable audience for us to label in there? Probably not, because those are the families of those victims, right? Like those who those victims are. So not a lot for us to talk about there. I think allies, yep. I think our allies, like our foreign allies and enemies. Probably another audience that I would say would also find value for themselves in that list?
Terrorists?
Yeah.
Killed other people.
I mean, yeah. I mean, I think because, not just because we said the victims, right? Like, we actually named who they were. So then, like, the terrorists find value in those namings of those groups because, like, obviously they see, like, how much impact they had, right? Like, how much effect they had. Okay. Any other part of the rhetorical situation outside of audience that we can connect it to? Answers aren't up there. The answers are going to be in your rhetorical situation. Move past audience. I'd probably move past exigence.
It has to be obstacles is the number one.
I mean, I think obstacles, I don't think there's anything in there to leverage. Okay, so what obstacle that we wrote down would that piece of evidence kind of play into?
It's emotions, like leveraging that.
I think an obstacle would be his own emotions, especially for that list of like showing like how devastating it was. I would think his trust and his authority would be another one, right? Because looking at the depth of that list. All right. Thousands of lives were suddenly ended by evil, despicable acts of terror. We don't have to annotate everything. I don't find real value in that. Like, not that there's not value. I don't find evidence in there that's valuable to note. The pictures of airplanes flying into buildings, fires burning, huge structures collapsing have filled us with disbelief, terrible sadness, and a quiet, unyielding anger. What pattern is in there? Oh my God, did y'all not have to think in English too at all? Good Lord. What pattern's in that sentence? A list, yes, good. So where's the list?
You describe some of the pictures.
Okay. Pictures of buildings, fires burning, huge structures collapsing. Okay, so we have, I'm going to move this over here. So we have a list. What would you label that first? It is a list, but if you were reading like a short story and I told you to like annotate, what would you label that? Imagery, yeah. So imagery is very lit analysis. It's not necessarily wrong here, but when we are looking at the words, right, which is what rhetoric is, we want to look at like what creates that imagery. So what we're looking at is you're looking at the flying, the burning, the collapsing, all the action, right? So I would be okay with imagery. However, action verbs actually gives you a little bit more to say. What else is in that sentence? There is a conjunction. What is it joining?
Sadness and quiet.
That's it?
A terrible sadness.
What is that and joining? What else can we label in there? It's another list. Y'all, multiple commas is a sign for a list or a compound complex sentence. So we have two lists in there. One, we could label a list of like action verbs. What could you label the second list? Oh, yep. A list of feelings or emotions. Okay? Rhetorical situation. Kind of seeing the same audience, right?
He says us. So like I don't know if he's speaking for like people. Like is that count as audience or that?
I mean, I think the grieving, I think it could, this is where we could maybe tie it into grieving Americans, right? Why? Because like it's this like common grief, this commonality that we have. I'm okay with like grieving Americans, but I could also see like our foreign allies, our enemies, the terrorists, right? Again, it shows like the effects of what happened. All right. These acts of mass murder were intended to frighten our nation into chaos and retreat, but they have failed. Our country is strong. Meh. I mean, maybe this idea of like chaos and retreat, now I'm starting to see a pattern with deliberate and deadly chaos and retreat. I'm starting to kind of see the pattern between the two. Also, I have the but, right? But they have failed. Our country is strong. So, and joins things together. What does but show? Contrast. Yeah. Yeah, opposite. So we have a contrast. So when I look at a contrast, I look at what is being contrasted. Before the but, it is like negative. Okay, the 9th grade boy, this is why I don't teach 9th graders, is that little giggle of the but. I don't teach 9th grade for that reason, and they smell funny. But they have failed. Our country is strong. So before we have a negative, what is it contrasting? Positive afterwards. So when you talk about contrast, you have to talk about what's contrasted. Negative action, positive reaction. Okay? Again, we go to rhetorical situation. I still think we could go the same as like grieving Americans, obstacles, right? I think we can also look at the speaker here. What is something we wrote down for the speaker as him as president that we can connect to this rhetorical situation?
Keep the country safe.
Yep. It's that reassurance, right? Didn't we also write like something about like represents the country to like foreign leaders, right? We can add that in there. Is there any summary in that? Not one piece of summary. Okay. A great people have been moved to defend a great nation. Terrorist attacks can shake the foundations of our biggest buildings, but they cannot shake or touch the foundation of America. These acts shatter steel, but they cannot dent the steel of American resolve. America was targeted for attack because we're the brightest beacon for freedom and opportunity in the world. And no one will keep that light from shining. Today, our nation saw evil, the very worst of human nature, and we responded with the best of America, with the daring of our rescue workers, with the caring for strangers and neighbors who came to give blood and help in any way they could. Top down, what do we see? Here's how this is going to go. Y'all are going to have to interact more, or else when we get to you doing it on your own, you're going to score the way you scored on your Skill 1 test. So you have to start thinking. What do you see in the first sentence?
Repetition.
Yeah. Repetition of great. Yep. Great people, great nation. Do I love it? I mean, I don't really know what else to say, right? Like just the repetition, but okay. I mean, like I'll notice it. What do you see in the next couple of sentences? Yep, with the but, right? So again, we look at terrorist attacks can shake the foundations of our biggest buildings, but they cannot touch the foundations of America. So in there you also see foundations, but they're contrasted. Okay. Same thing happens in the next one. These acts shatter steel, but they cannot dent the steel of American resolve. Again, you have steel. So you have a contrast in there. But before it, it's a contrast of what? Like something physical, right? Foundation of building, steel, shattering steel, physical. After it is foundation of America, the steel of American resolve. That is abstract, right? So something physical represents something abstract. It is a contrast, but what else could you call it?
I don't know, like it's not a simile.
Yeah, a simile or metaphor. Yeah, I don't care either way, right? Metaphor being like the idea of representing two unlike things, right? Physical, abstract. So there's two. We actually have a third because we're the brightest beacon, right? For freedom and opportunity. No one will keep that light from shining. So we actually have another one that is a comparison, right? Comparing America to a beacon. Again, metaphor, simile, I don't care either way. It's a comparison or a contrast. All right, rhetorical situation. Now when we can look at the audience and we can look at terrorists, right? Need to know that. Our allies and enemies will see that. Also, as a speaker, you can look at that like he wants to represent to foreign countries. Oops, I didn't spell that right. Foreign countries. Also, the idea of keeping us safe. All right. Next one. Today our nation saw evil, the very worst of human nature. Again, I don't recommend analyzing a dash. It's easy to label. Here, what is the dash doing? It's defining. So the very worst of human nature is like redefining what evil is. So I'd probably label it more of like definition instead of like a dash because there's not much to do there. You can do, though, there's a conjunction in there, but it's also showing a contrast, right? Today our nation saw evil. That's the negative. We responded with the best. So evil and best are opposites, so contrast. Again, I think the rhetorical situation can go the same as above. Does that help? Y'all are going to have to start thinking through things instead of just waiting for me to answer, because I won't always answer. All right, your only homework tonight, I try not to give 2 things of homework.